I talked to Cowboy yesterday face to face, and he gave me an update on what he's doing, where he's headed with his career. He said, I'm all in. I am 100% in. One last run for everything. I will take any risk at any level. I'm going to do everything at 155. 155, this is Cowboy talking, creates a dedication that has to exist. A byproduct of making 155 pounds requires certain nutrition, certain sleep, and X amount of hours in the day of training, burning calories. I fully understand that. I know some guys, you had to put them amateur wrestling. I had a teammate named Doug Lee, but Doug Lee had to be a specific weight. He had to. And it wasn't because he wasn't good enough to go with bigger guys. The weight class that he chose of 184 pounds created a byproduct of him getting extra miles in. The way Doug would lose weight was to run. The more Doug ran, the better shape he would get in, and his conditioning was directly related to his performance. He was one of these guys. Doug Lee is one of the great wrestlers you've never heard of. Doug Lee beat somebody you might have heard of at an NCAA tournament called Daniel Cormier. Doug Lee beat somebody at an NCAA tournament named Brad Varing. I mean, Doug Lee could wrestle with anybody, but he had to do it at a specific weight, and the weight was relevant. If he could get this weight off, the things that he had to do to make the weight is what made him great. I bring Doug into this because I get what Cowboy's saying. Going 155 is important for two reasons. First of all, us, the fan, who is going to dictate and drive a guy's placement on a card, and we are going to help affect and influence his ranking, we have to know the story that we're telling. And if you're bouncing between 55 and 70, even though that story should be told, this is a guy with courage and balls that'll do it against anybody. Though that is the story that should be told, what inadvertently happens is we now have no cannon pointed in the same direction. It's very hard to become a contender if you do not identify the weight class for anybody, all the way up to Conor McGregor. A problem that Conor was finding on accident of going 170. Sure, he could sell out arenas. Sure, he could get major attention. He could not get a ranking and a title opportunity unless he identified the weight class. I bring you the Conor example because if something's even true for the star's biggest sport, of course, the rest of us have to live with it. So Cowboy identifying 155 is very important in the storytelling that he is on one last run. You cannot go on one last run at two weight classes. You can do something cool. You can be a meaningful guy. You can get a lot of credit for being one of the few guys willing to do it over the spread of parity of two different divisions, but you can't get that title shot. So it was very important that Cowboy identified this. And then secondly, I liked his reason. I really liked what he said. I like that his thought was that 155 requires certain things. Discipline. It requires certain discipline acts that motivation and other things in itself couldn't do. So I just understood what he was saying. And so then I start thinking, okay, well, Cowboy's a meaningful guy. Cowboy's not going to be less than a co-main event. He could end up in a 5-round atmosphere, find himself a main event. But what do you do with Cowboy? Where should Cowboy go from here? I don't see a scenario right now because of the logjam that has been created at 155. I don't believe anybody right now, absent illness or injury, right, of one of Conor Poirier, Gaethje, Chandler, and now you got Charles Oliveira. Excuse me. You have Charles Oliveira in this mix too. I don't believe anybody, as good as they are, I don't believe anybody can crack into that. I believe that is set. I believe that is where the promotion is going, and they're going to figure it out with those players until they open up the floodgates for somebody new. That's not a problem because two of those guys, Conor and Poirier, are 21 days away. So this isn't some built-in problem. This isn't some closed society that you can't get into forever. You just need, you need, in that case, 3 weeks. And as far as the Gaethje Chandler, which is a rumor largely that I'm starting, but I look at the players left on the board, I think that I'm right there. I think that that's right around the corner too. I think that's February or March. So all of a sudden you are going to be able to open the door and you're going to see something that's new. So hold that thought. What do you do in the meantime? I think when you're talking about Cowboy Cerrone, I think it would be a tragedy, an absolute travesty to have Paul Felder and Donald Cerrone in the same organization at the same weight class, willing to do the same thing at the same time and not put them together. I just do. I think that it's got to be Felder. I think it's got to be Cerrone. I think for their own good, it needs to be a co-main event. I do not need to see those two knuckleheads bludgeon each other for 25 minutes just purely for my play. They can prove their point and deliver us a fight of the year candidate in 15 minutes. I'm adding to it. I don't really get my say of the placement of the card. It's enough for me to ask Sean Shelby and Mick Maynard for a match. It's enough of me to do. I don't then get to ask the placement on the card. I was trying to add to the thought, but think about that match. Think about these two kickboxers who really get their due in kickboxing, but if you look a little bit closer, know exactly what they're doing on the ground. Paul Felder almost never sees himself there. His wrestling defenses have gotten so good, and Donald Cerrone will submit you from there. His jiu-jitsu's gotten so good. It's one of these things where you don't really know what you're going to get, but at the same time, we can't have these guys. We can't have these guys sign same weight, agreeing to everything and not put them together. I just don't think we can. I think that's a perfect placeholder. I think it's a perfect what do you do until somebody's going to break into it. We're closing out 2020 with Conor, Poirier, Chandler, Gaethje, and now Charles Oliveira. I keep wanting to call him Figueiredo, by the way. I apologize. Oliveira. That narrative is not going to be the narrative we are having at the end of 2021. You are going to have all new players. This narrative was not a narrative we had coming in to 2020. Figueiredo was not in the equation. Chandler was not in the organization. Just by example, Khabib was still champion. Now it looks like he's retired, but there's a lot of moving parts. Is Conor coming back, isn't he? Is Conor going up to 170 as Masvidal and Kamaru Usman? I mean, there were so many questions that we don't have right now. We have several of the answers. I just share for you that 55-pounders had better be on notice, and they better be starting to line themselves up and position themselves. There is going to be opportunity. It is closed door right now. We have a little mini round robin of 5, potentially of 6, if Khabib, who is still champion, decides to retire. It's just one of these things. But this is not going to be a thing for very long. We're going to get activity and answers from 2 of those participants in the next 21 days. So I just share with you, Cowboy's in a good spot. I love that he's hungry. I love that he's coming back. I love the discipline. I love the built-in mechanisms at 155. We're still stuck with the question, who is his next opponent going to be? I will submit for you my choice, Paul Felder.